Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I'm just going to say I'm here to defend one of the worst movies of 1985, A View to a Kill. Don't get upset with me, please. I didn't say it. I didn't call it the worst movie, or not the worst, but one of the worst movies of 1985, or the summer of 1985. I didn't say it. But here's who did.
The name is Bond, James Bond.
Another lousy Roger Moore James Bond film.
Well, those are moments from three movies that if you didn't get the point, we could have done without this summer. American Flyer, The Man with the One Red Shoe, and A View to a Kill. Three of the movies we didn't like so much during our so-called summer vacation.
Now, in case Roger and I didn't make things clear at the start, this special edition of At the Movies is dedicated to giving one last shot at 8 of the worst movies of the past summer. Coming up next at the movies, what I sincerely hope will be the last time Roger Moore attempts to play James Bond. I've said a dozen times on this show over the years how much I hate Roger Moore as James Bond. I feel like I'm watching an imposter filling in for Sean Connery, our guest spy tonight, Roger Moore. And what I object to in A View to a Kill, the latest Moore Bond film, is that Moore just seems to be waltzing through this picture. No emotion, no joy, just a few disdainful smiles. On to the next scene, give me the paycheck.
What I'm beginning to feel now with this film and a couple of the others is we've probably had enough James Bond movies. I mean, it was a good idea, and it lasted a long time, 20 years, and it's such a formula now and so predictable that, frankly, I'm just not interested in one more villain, one more attempt to take over the world, one more pretty girl with a double meaning to her name.
Right.
I just don't care anymore.
Wow. They really did not like the movie. But I'm going to say this. Siskel, he just didn't like Roger Moore. I mean, let's be honest.
What can you say about the Bonds? I'll tell you what I think. I haven't liked a Bond picture ever since Sean Connery left the series. I think Roger Moore, by comparison to Connery, who was exciting and virile, Roger Moore is a piece of wood. He's stiff. He's boring. I don't like to see him.
So there you have it. Well, maybe he would like Timothy Dalton better since, Roger Moore would have his last outing.
This one's called The Living Daylights. I'm Gene Siskel with the Chicago Tribune.
So.
Me too, Roger. I was disappointed in the film. I'm not as impressed, actually, with Dalton as you are. He's better than Roger Moore, but for me, that's not much of a compliment. He's nowhere near Connery was. It's a classic figure. To me, he looked a little mousy. This Pierce Brosnan, I saw him in a new film coming up, Fourth Protocol. I think he might make a better Bond. He has more of the verve for life. This guy seems a little reticent.
No, I guess not. Timothy Dalton didn't do it for him either. But you know what? He did mention Pierce Brosnan. Well, wouldn't you know? That was the next James Bond. Well, surely he's got to love him then.
I enjoyed GoldenEye for what it was, though, and I give it thumbs up.
Well, that thumbs up comes as a surprise because I didn't get a sense at all that you enjoyed this picture. I certainly didn't.
You didn't? Okay.
No, I didn't. I think that he isn't an interesting Bond. I like Connery, and everybody else has been nothing compared to Connery. Frankly, Roger Moore has a more commanding physical presence than this guy. I thought this was an average picture. It's a routine story, just like you said.
Well, they're all routine stories.
No,
let's face it.
let me
Most
tell you.
of them are.
No, the classic ones, the
Well,
early
there are a few.
Connery
The
ones.
first three,
of course,
three, okay.
those are classics,
Yeah.
and those are the ones that I recommend. I can't recommend this picture at all.
Okay. So honestly, there's no winning with Siskel. Because with him, once Sean Connery was no longer Bond, he just wrote Bond off. So I'm sorry. It just didn't matter who portrayed Bond or what next Bond movie was coming out. Siskel just was going to refuse to like it. All right. Well, aren't we glad that they did not stop making James Bond films back in 1985? I mean, imagine all the Bond movies we'd be without today. But, okay, let's go right back to A View to a Kill, though. So in 1985, View to a Kill comes out. Now, I've heard some call it like a TV movie or made-for-TV movie type quality. Yeah, I can actually kind of see that. I think maybe in the filming style, it does seem like almost a bit like a made-for-TV movie. But it did have a good title sequence, or the pre-title sequence, I thought. That was pretty good. The snowboarding, and it had a kick butt song from Duran Duran. I mean, come on. At the time, they were only one of the hottest groups to exist at the time. Literally almost every song on their albums, one by one, they were getting released onto the radio, and like every single song was a huge hit. And guess what? A View to a Kill, the title song, was no different. It was a huge hit. And I mean, I lived through it, and I can honestly say that we looked forward to being able to see the music video when it came on MTV too. And let's face it, even up to today, it still sounds good. They still play it amazing. I can admit it was not Roger Moore's best Bond movie. In fact, he even knew that he was getting just a little too old for this role, especially, and he had written about this. When he found out that his co-star and love interest, Tanya Roberts, when he found out her age and the age of her mother, he was like, okay, I think I'm getting a little too old to this, because Tanya Roberts' mother was Roger Moore's age at the time that, Tanya Roberts was going to be his love interest in the movie. But I still found Roger Moore to be pretty spry for his age. I mean, he's running, he's hanging off of things, he's still putting up a really good fight. When I was watching this as a teenager, I never really looked at him and was thinking, wow, that guy's just way too old for this. No, I mean, I'm a teenager and I'm watching Roger Moore as Bond, and he was still a hero to me. I wasn't thinking about his age. He was still the action hero that I had always seen. View to a Kill also had the last appearance of Lois Maxwell as Moneypenny as well. So that was an end to an iconic portrayal and character. Well, not character, but an actress who had been in all the previous Bond movies. But then now we come to Christopher Walken. He was a great Bond villain. He plays that part of a psychopath very well. Mayday, Grace Jones. Okay, she's not the world's best actor, but I did always wonder why. So she's so strong, right? In this scene, she like picks this guy up, and he's, she could just throw him. But we never really saw her use that massive strength again until the very end, when she needed to do a little bit of heavy lifting and pushing. But it wasn't a threat that was really ever used against James Bond. And usually when we saw these special abilities to people, it was a threat to Bond where it was going to get used. So, that was a little wasted there. But Roger Moore, Christopher Walken, they had some great scenes together. They had some good chemistry back and forth with insults from time to time even. So with this Bond movie, I did always kind of like how James Bond used the things around him to help himself and to save himself. There weren't a whole lot of gadgets this time in this movie. So for example, using his surroundings, he uses the ski off of a snowmobile and he uses it as a snowboard to go down the side of a mountain. He used a flare to bring down a helicopter. He uses a tire underwater and he just uses the air out of the tire to help him be able to breathe underwater, and stayed underwater until the coast was clear. He uses just a couple of tape recorders and a little sleight of hand, even with a tape, to trick the bad guys from time to time. He escapes out of a burning elevator shaft in a building with no extra gear. He hung on to the anchoring rope of a blimp over the San Francisco skyline. There were some gadgets, of course. The mini sub, he had these X-ray type glasses that helped him see through the tinting of the window. He had this little, it was like a credit card swipe thing, where you just would slide across there. He had that so he could make a copy of what had been on a piece of paper previously. And with no introduction to those gadgets. So they were just thrown in there. He just happened to have them at the right moment. And then the little robot, you see the little robot at towards the beginning and then at the very end. But none of these gadgets were used to save Bond's life, like so many other of his gadgets had been. Just even his watch, from time to time, had saved Bond's life. But not this movie. Bond really relied on himself and his surroundings to save his life. So that was pretty good, I thought, and in terms of having that mindset of survival and using what's around you to survive. I will also be able to admit this. The special effects, they were not as good as some of the other Bond movies. A lot of times it was pretty obvious we were on a film set. So that was fairly obvious. The editing between Roger Moore and his stuntmen, that was off from time to time. They didn't do a great job with that. You could always tell a lot of times when it was a stunt person. And there were some good locations, but also not the best locations. Not the most exotic of locations as many of the other Bond movies. So, I can freely admit that this was not one of the best James Bond movies. But really, is it one of the worst movies of 1985? Well, what were some of the other movies that came out in 1985? Well, let's take a look at some of the really amazing ones. Honestly, 1985 had some iconic movies come out. You had Back to the Future, The Goonies, Clue, The Color Purple, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, Silverado, Cocoon, Mask, Witness. Now, these were some other ones that I consider to be iconic movies. Maybe they weren't the highest rated, but for me, when I went and saw them, or from years past that, I've always loved these movies. Teen Wolf, Lady Hawk, The Legend of Billie Jean, Better Off Dead, The Journey of Natty Gann, Fletch, Spies Like Us, Rocky IV. Come on, with one of the most iconic montages. So I'm not saying that I think A View to a Kill is certainly better than those movies, but was it the worst in the category of the worst of 1985? So they listed other movies that were really bad for 1985, and I agreed with those. But here's some other ones that didn't get mentioned in their worst of 1985 that I'm surely A View to a Kill is better than these. Did you ever hear of Jim Cotta? I remember that one. It was pretty bad. It had some kind of cool music though. The story was cool if they could have executed it, but the movie just was not very good. Now here was one, Baby, Secret of the Lost Legend. Now this was supposed to be about this baby dinosaur that gets found in the jungle. And man, was that movie horrible. The acting, the effects, they were just bad. And that was supposed to be a big movie at the time. When it came out, it said it was the greatest adventure ever born. But man, was that movie bad. Now, I mentioned Teen Wolf. I love Teen Wolf, but even I have to admit, I think probably A View to a Kill was still a better made movie than Teen Wolf. So I wouldn't have put Teen Wolf over that. Now, I also never thought Weird Science was all that was cracked up to be. A Room with a View? Oh, man, that movie was boring. Desperately Seeking Susan? That was rough. I mean, Madonna and acting? No. And then a Jewel of the Jewel of the Nile. That was the sequel to Romancing the Stone. That came out in 1985. Jewel of the Nile. I liked Romancing the Stone, but this sequel, no, it was not good. Well, here's my point. I don't think A View to a Kill deserved a Worst of the Year. There were some iconic movies that year, but there were also a lot of stinkers. And I don't think A View to a Kill was a stinker of a movie. I really honestly think it was just they were biased against Roger Moore. If it wasn't Sean Connery, then forget it. It didn't matter who it was going to be. If it wasn't Sean Connery, they weren't going to like the Bond movie. I didn't think that was fair. Of course, it's not the best Roger Moore Bond movie, but it's still a fun movie. Good music, lots of action, adventure, escapes. The acting is solid. Got a good villain. To me, A View to a Kill is worth defending. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Give me your thoughts. What do you think? Do you think that A View to a Kill would have fallen into one of the worst movies of 1985? I look forward, and I hope this gets out there, and I hope I can get to see a number of comments, because I would really be interested to see what you think. Anyway, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.